All right, let's go ahead and get started. First things first, I'd like to do a few housekeeping items. I'd like to thank everybody for taking the time on this beautiful day brought to you by DOT. I brought the weather, so treat me nice. But thank you for spending this evening with us going over the Highway 32 corridor study in downtown De Pere. I know this is a really valuable study to the city and residents and business owners, so I really appreciate that you're taking the time to come and give us your input. This is the final meeting of the planning study, but not the final opportunity for input on this project. I just want to point that out. First, I'm going to start off with the housekeeping items. Like I said, I'm going to introduce my project team. My name is Bryan Lipke. I'm the project manager with WisDOT. I work in the planning section. Then I have over here, this is Jamie Curtin. She's with MSA, who's our design consultant, working on all of the design elements of the planning study. And Kevin Ruland, he's with MSA as well. He's our traffic analyst and engineer that is part of our team. Then we have members of our team that are with the City of De Pere. We've got Eric Rakers, who sits in the back with the City of De Pere. We've got Scott Thorson, who couldn't join us. He's the Director of Public Works. And then also not joining us tonight, we have Kim Flom, who's the Economic Development and Planning Chief, or I should say Director for the City of De Pere. She's also on our team, per se. Then we've got, from DOT, we've got Jill Michelson, who's our Planning Supervisor, Brian Brock, who's our Planning Manager at WisDOT. I also am joined by Mark Cantola, who's our Region Communications Manager. I think that covers everybody. And then also, I would also like to thank special recognition to Representative Andre Jacques for joining us tonight. He is De Pere's representative, so we should all give him a thank you for coming out and learning a little bit more about the project in case any constituents have any questions that follow. So housekeeping items, I guess I would just basically describe, you guys all received a handout when you walked in that has a lot of the information about the corridor. And then you also got a packet that has Alternative 1 and Alternative 3, which are the remaining alternatives, with a really detailed matrix analysis that's also up here on display. I'm going to go through in my presentation some of the finer points of that. Otherwise, if you walk around the room, we were purposeful in bringing the displays of the dismissed alternatives, a really good matrix of the factors that were considered at the time of those dismissals. I'll cover in my presentation the methodology and timing of when those were removed from the study, since the last PIM effort we had was, I believe, in March of 2013. So it has been a while since we've been out to the public, but these are the same alternatives that were first presented to the public at that time. Those displays also include typical sections. They include the roadway sections for all of those alternatives as well. And then some people might be curious about the railroad analysis. The CN Railroad Bridge that is on the west segment, right before you get into downtown in the one-way pairs. The study did look at expanding the structure for 4 lanes, given that there's 1 lane eastbound and 2 lanes westbound, or 2 lanes eastbound and 1 lane westbound, I'm sorry, for that constraint. So our study was championed with also doing that analysis, and you'll find that is over there along with a matrix of factors as well, similar to here. So the format of tonight's meeting is basically going to be probably a 20-minute presentation, and then I'm going to have maybe 5 minutes of questions, and I'm going to ask my timekeepers to kind of watch it so we can get back to the open house format where the staff that is joining me from the city and MSA and WisDOT can answer questions, and we can formally record some of your comments on the alternatives. So, okay, so the agenda for tonight is I'm going to give you a general overview of remaining alternatives in the downtown. I'm going to share in-depth analysis of the CN Railroad Bridge. And I'm going to tell you what the decision was from that analysis. Then I'm going to share the roadway reconstruction schedule, which basically is the transition of the study to an improvement project that has been programmed for the corridor. And then I'm going to close the presentation and give a brief Q&A where you guys can ask me any questions you have. I'm going to try to go into as many details as I possibly can, trying to give you as much information so I can gather your feedback. And then we'll move to an open house format where more questions can be asked. Okay, the corridor purpose, I guess, from initiation of the study in 2011, WisDOT normally has a process by which we program for 6 years, and I know the condition of Highway 32 in the 1 mile corridor had reached a point where we needed to start thinking about programming it. And at the time of programming, we always meet with the City of De Pere. So in meeting with the City of De Pere, we basically determined that rather than going through a scoping process, that a planning study that really analyzed alternatives was the way to go versus our normal process for just scoping a reconstruction, given the urban atmosphere and the complexity of an urban design. So the study had these main purposes in mind, and that was to develop typical cross-sections for the reconstruction roadway, determine lane widths, determine parking, determine if bike lanes were appropriate, analyze existing traffic and proposed traffic patterns. We knew that there were some operational concerns out there right from the start. I think even when we were initially trying to determine if we could scope it properly, we knew that we were going to be out there analyzing intersections and looking at a lot of this information. We were going to need to determine those intersection operations with some pretty in-depth analysis as well. We were going to explore the city's comprehensive plan for bikes and pedestrians. We wanted to incorporate it as much as we could. We wanted to take a look at whether transit on the corridor was properly being addressed, as we don't want to exclude any mobility issues. We wanted to investigate the existing railroad bridge that was built in 1952. We do know that railroad bridges that are of similar design, which is a through-plate girder design bridge, have about a 100-year useful life. Right now, that bridge built in 52 is about 60 years into its design life, and it has about 40 years of life left. We did know at the time of initially starting the study that inspections have shown that the bridge is in very good condition, and does definitely seem to bode well for that remaining useful life. We wanted to make sure that we identify utility replacements, as this is an urban reconstruction project. So we wanted to include any attempts that the city would need to make for upgrading their water and sewer, given that it's a reconstruction. We don't want to be sawing up new pavement at any given time for upgrades to utility lines. So we were championed with taking a look at that. And then the study will also, because it is trying to complete what we call project level scoping. In other words, giving us a schedule, a budget, and basically an estimate of cost at the conclusion of the study. We knew that we wanted to complete a substantial part of the preliminary design on what would become the preliminary alternative, or the selected alternative, that you guys are going to help us determine what that alternative is. And then, like I said, we do have the funded improvement project for 2022, so that kind of puts us in that schedule for deliverables for the planning study and helps us kind of shape where we are today. I put this slide in here because it basically want to kind of identify in an overview format kind of what we have done so far, just to kind of gather some input. Because like I said, a complex urban design and a transportation design in general has a lot of facets and a lot of stakeholders that we ask to walk along with us, and in order to find the right solutions, we have to incorporate a lot of their input, especially in a long-term reconstruction project like this is, that we're expecting to last for a good long time. So the intent of the slide is just to remind you that there's trade-offs associated. Go ahead, Brian.
Can you kind of just read around the...
Yeah, no problem. Well, some of these project considerations that we wanted to talk about are kind of like the issues that I talked about when we were going through initially determining why we needed to study. Parking is a lot of the of value. Real estate impacts, we have to have a good handle of that. Traffic operations, downtown identity, when we talk about when we talk about maybe perhaps the railroad bridge being a gateway into the downtown, bicycles and pedestrians. Obviously, the city has their bike plan that we should definitely consider in our transportation improvements. We have safety issues. We always try to do a 5-year crash analysis, and we try to really hammer down what are the contributing factors to each crash. We definitely look at costs, livable community. We know we've got a mix of residential in with our business district downtown, so we have to really consider the users that are in this. Then we've got environmental constraints. I know that there's always going to be issues like hazmat, issues like parkland, which are publicly owned land that maybe the city owns or things like that. We have to consider, and then design standards. We have to make it safe for the design speeds. We have to make it make it safe for trucks. You know, it is a trucking corridor, so we have to meet these lane widths and other design factors of controlling criteria. And combine them all. Sometimes they compete against each other, and sometimes they all line up, but either way, your goal is a balanced design that serves the public in the best capacity. So when we came out to you the last time, after the study kicked off in 2012, our first public information meeting was held in March of 2013, and we introduced the 5 alternatives that were going to be considered as part of the study. Alternative 1 was improve existing configuration. Alternative 2 was a 2-way conversion of Main Street to Highway 32, and then Reed Street would become a local street. Alternative 2B was convert Reed Street to Highway 32, and Main Street would become a local street. And then alternative 3 was 3rd and 4th Street would become one-way pairs. In other words, northbound traffic would utilize 3rd Street north and south, and on 4th Street, southbound traffic would primarily occur on the one-way on 4th Street. Then alternative 4 was a downtown master plan, which showed reverse circulating lane, trying to get one lane of traffic in the block of 3rd and 6th. And then we had the modified downtown plan, which was basically the reverse flow lanes were only over to 4th and 6th Street between 3rd and 4th. They would remain, the 3rd and 4th would remain as one-way pairs. And I apologize, but the slide did have crossed out the alternatives that have been removed, so I'll step through those with you. Alternative 4 and 5 were recommended to be removed with further study after some stakeholder discussions, and then we had a planning commission meeting on August of 2013, and it was decided primarily because of safety and operational concerns. Alternatives 4 and 5 were beyond the other alternatives that were presented as far as removing too much of the on-street parking. And the impacts were also pretty great in that there were some real estate that was needed as far as buildings went. So that was when alternatives 4 and 5 were removed. Then in October of 2013, after some more design was done, we met with the Planning Commission again to present the 2-way conversion of Main Street. At that time, the Planning Commission did recommend that we remove alternative 2 of converting Main Street to a 2-way roadway and make Reed a local street. However, at that meeting that they dismissed that alternative, they came to us with a secondary proposal that they wanted us to investigate, which was converting Reed Street instead to the Highway 32 corridor and vacating Main Street to JT it back as a local street. So from the time we met with them in August, or I should say in October of 2013, until we went back to them in February, we had 2B, alternative 2B on the table. When we met with them Then again, in February of 2014, which was our last outreach with the Planning Commission, Alternative 2B was presented and had equally high impacts at Reed Street by converting it to 2 lanes. I believe a lot of the intersection of 3rd Street was a lot of real estate impacts. In fact, the buildings were hindering any operational improvements that we needed to make with that alternative. The parking as well was very impactful, and it was dismissed also. There's a really good matrix of the dismissed alternatives. With all of those factors, you can look and see how much of the parking was impacted. You can kind of look at some of the nuances that were in those different alternatives, and you certainly can comment on any of them tonight, but please do realize that the only alternatives that remain are oh, this is the slide, sorry. This is the better one. I didn't realize that I inserted both of them, so I do apologize. But this one shows that they've all have fallen away except for alternative 1 and 2. So I'm going to give you now really a good overview of what alternative 1 and alternative 2 are. When we say the study segment starts on 8th Street over to 3rd Street, I just want to stress that the alternatives are primarily between 6th Street and 3rd Street, where we're in the one-way pairs segment. So tonight I want your comments primarily for the alternatives analysis to be reflective of which one you prefer, alternative 1 or alternative 3. We're calling alternative 1 maintain existing flow while addressing safety and capacity at these intersections that I talked about that have some issues for operations. Those locations I'm going to kind of spell out for you, but here they're listed: Main and 4th Street, Main and 6th Street, Reed and 3rd Street, and then again this concept of traffic calming that I'll go over when I pull up here. So basically, operations, as I step left to right, we are proposing at 6th Street to add a left turn lane that does, a left turn lane that does not exist today to the intersection for operations. We're proposing, I believe, another left turn lane that does not exist today at 4th, and I believe that there is a right turn lane that is proposed on 5th and Reed. I believe there's a left turn lane in 3rd to 4th Street that is proposed, because this segment between 3rd and 4th has the most operational delay on the corridor. You'll find that when left turning vehicles or vehicles that are headed northbound here come through, particularly I think in the AM peak, the backups are quite considerable in the 3rd to 4th Street segment. So in improving general operations, those are the turn lanes that are added. More specifically, another feature that we're kind of looking at here is narrowing the lanes. Currently they're 12 feet. We're going to narrow them down to 11-foot lanes. We're going to do some features called bump outs at pedestrian crossings that give a visual feel of again, narrowing the roadway a little bit visually. Parking lanes are narrowed slightly throughout the corridor. Currently, Reed Street and Main Street have uniquely different typicals. You can kind of see, if I pull it up over here, I'm going to go back to that slide. You can see one has a 52-foot existing on this would be Main Avenue, and we are going to go down to 49 feet. So we're definitely narrowing up the roadway. And then Reed Street, I think, starts out at pretty much the same. It's 46 feet, so that's more in line with what we have needs. Right now, Reed Street does not have bike accommodations. Because of the one-way pairs, we do want to get bike accommodations on Reed Street also, and there's enough right-of-way to go ahead and do that as well. So another unique aspect of the improved existing conditions is a conversation that the city, I'm going to answer questions.
I just have one question. I have to leave for another meeting.
Okay.
I haven't seen it on any of the drawings. Have you figured out the possibility of putting angle parking on the streets? Because the way I pace it off, I think you could get another 2 to 3 cars on each side.
I don't know that we've had angle parking as on a state trunk highway. I don't know where we
Well,
are.
it's still not just a city trunk highway, it's the main drag.
Brian, why don't you continue the presentation?
Okay.
I'll get his name and number, and we'll
Yeah.
follow up with them on the phone.
Thank you, Mark. I appreciate that. Okay. I guess in outreach with the stakeholders, one of them was the Expera Mill, and I know the city and the study team have been having some conversations on some operational improvements that we can make at 5th and 6th Street that would be part of this improve existing conditions. Where basically right now the mill traffic comes up 5th Street and operationally enters right here. And it does create some backups and some concerns. As I spoke, there's a left turn lane that's being installed here on 6th Street, and it could be an operational improvement to the overall circulation if we in fact have the mill work with us to take their access back off of Fort Howard, 6th Street, a little bit north of the intersection, and then primarily this would just become a driveway for the adjacent properties here as opposed to the through entrance for trucks from the mill and from the employees that cycle in and out during shift changes and do greatly affect the through traffic and operations. So when we speak about evaluating the intersections, there was also the issue of signalizing 6th Street. It did not meet warrants when we initially looked at it, but after talking to the mill and in the possibility that this traffic switch happens as this conversation is ongoing, there might be a need more at the time of reconstruction to evaluate if it is appropriate to signalize 6th Street for both the gain for pedestrians and for this change in traffic patterns. So that is a conversation that is ongoing. And then another thing to mention too is this intersection of 3rd Street was also evaluated for signalization, and that is primarily due to pedestrian movements as well. But that is more related to the next alternative, so let me skip ahead. Okay, so those operational improvements are primarily what would occur through the reconstruction segment. No other traffic patterns would exist, changes would exist with alternative 1. Alternative 3, however, is improve operations and safety within the existing footprint, but we would in fact make some directional changes in traffic, and those are 3rd Street would become a one-way northbound from Grant to Main, and 4th Street would become a one-way southbound from Grant to Main. And then there would be those same improvements that would be at Main and 6th and Main and 5th and Reed and 5th and et cetera. There would still be those same traffic calming measures, those bump outs, the narrowing of lanes. Some of those features that I mentioned, one of them being the city is actually thinking about installing what they call help me out, a speed table. You basically you drive up over it, and it makes it harder for the pedestrian or the traffic to accelerate faster than the posted speed. And in fact, it's a better location too for pedestrians to cross that busy alleyway that goes between 4th Street. But primarily with these traffic pattern changes on 3rd and 4th Street, we have to consider what they mean to the overall operations and safety. Number one, they make it a lot easier for pedestrians at the Main and 4th Street intersection. You would still operationally need this turn lane that would exist here, but because you would not have a northbound cycle coming up 4th Street, it definitely would improve operations in this segment that I was talking about. Has so many delays and so many issues with pedestrian safety. One of those pedestrian safety issues is right now, currently the pedestrian crossing is right over here. There have been some incidents where there's near misses and such with pedestrians crossing in that location. We are proposing to move the crossing over to the to the right side or to the east of the intersection, and that way the traffic that's in this left turning lane can judge both can judge traffic that's coming over the bridge at a good clip, and then they can also navigate without having to be directly put into conflict with that pedestrian that is trying to cross, because a lot of times they're looking right and then they pull forward and then there's a pedestrian there and it does create some issues. So this one-way pair scenario also has some additional turn lanes that are needed over here at St. Norbert's College. It has those same it has those same intersection improvements that would be necessary at 5th and Main and at 6th and Main. And then we just demonstrate here with the displays some operational improvements with turn lanes that exist on Reed that are necessary. And then, like I said, you pretty much have the same traffic patterns on Main and Reed. You're only back and forth. So, and then you have the same proposed typical section changes that I talked about last time on the other alternative. But unique to alternative 3 is a bigger picture that I want you to consider tonight. If we do in fact find that there are operational improvements in the downtown area of the one-way pairs, if we do in fact find that they are favorable with some of the outreach that we're doing, and if we find that they're favorable with the larger stakeholders like St. Norbert's and the property owners, the city would make efforts to extend the one-way pairs in the city limits down to Lost Dauphin. Right now, I think Kevin has analyzed our traffic, and right now there's about a 2/3, 1/3 split for AM and PM traffic. I think in the mornings, traffic is always primarily 2/3 headed northbound on 3rd Street, and in the PM, the same 2/3, 1/3 split exists on 4th Street. And I know that it's always been a conversation, and I think in April of 2013, we met with St. Norbert's. They've always had an intention to try to close off traffic if they could on 3rd Street, because they're concerned with speeds that go through the campus, and they're concerned with a higher volume of traffic as well. We've had conversations with them about the 3rd and 4th one-way pairs. They wanted to be reassured that it followed patterns, which we have indicated to them that we've studied the traffic patterns. The intersections would also be improved, as that you would not have conflicting traffic turning movements for left turns if they were converted to one-way pairs. The minimal redirection that residents would have to make could be on Marsh Street, High Street, and then I think Landy Street also goes through as well. So there could be some circulation with minimal redirection for those residents, but primarily only doing the 3rd and 4th Street one-way pairs north of Grant might be short-sighted to what is really happening on the corridor. So I think that the city wants us to consider tonight that when you give input on whether you think that the 3rd and 4th Street is a operationally or a superior alternative, we certainly want you to consider that we have these extra steps to go through to decide if the city will pursue signing and making those changes. Some of the impacts we list in the matrix also are that all these parking lots that are primarily private use would have to do different signing, obviously, if there's roadway changes. So there are some general impacts that we have to think about as secondary. So that is primarily the two alternatives that we can talk about. And then we, basically after we left the Planning Commission meeting in February of 2014, we really were kind of digging our heels in on analyzing the railroad alternatives. So basically we looked at 4 alternatives, and I have them laid out in the order that I have, primarily kind of in the order they were looked at and kind of feasibility sort of fell away. Alternative one that you can see a little bit closer when we get to open house format is maintain the existing bridge with the addition of multi-use path for getting full access for bikes and pedestrians. Alternative 4 was an at-grade crossing, which basically means we'd remove the subway type of situation that exists today, and we would make it an at-grade crossing. All of our alternatives tried to raise the vertical clearance of the structure because it only is 14 feet right now. Preferred design would be 16 feet 9 inches for railroad clearance on a bridge if we were to reconstruct. And then alternative 2 was trying to achieve that desired height of the structure and a 4-lane typical section with a shoe fly bridge alternative, which basically a shoe fly builds a temporary bridge off alignment and then builds on the permanent structure on the same existing alignment, and then you have the throwaway cost of the temporary structure that you have to remove. A permanent offset alignment basically, did I say that right? Okay, so a permanent offset alignment, basically the alignment that you're building offset is actually what the rail is going to actually, you're building right next to the live railroad basically, and then that alignment becomes the primary route. It does have a little more impacts in that it goes back, I think, a little bit further. So I just introduced those alternatives so I could just kind of speak a little bit more to the level that we analyzed each of them. When we looked at these alternatives, we basically did what was called a cost-benefit analysis, which is a technical term for basically an industry standard of looking at roadway and rail costs in an economic type setting, where you can put tangible dollar amounts to things like safety and operations and delays. Some of those costs that are looked at are actually the construction costs, the user delay that can be assigned some value, operational costs during and after construction. Then also we can actually assign values to the crash reduction and the safety improvements. And so it's pretty easy to understand how large values could be attributed to safety negativity with an at-grade crossing. So alternative 4 and alternative 1 were easily dismissed early on as unfeasible. Alternative 1 primarily because we couldn't actually get 4 lanes of traffic under the bridge. Alternative 4 because going to an at-grade crossing would mean substantial delays to traffic as trains came through. And it would also mean that that if there was a safety concern, those impacts add up to considerable costs. So in order to assign this user delay, we basically had to figure out what the 3-lane typical that exists under the bridge right now means to users. Does the constraint of having 3 lanes of traffic versus 4 lanes, which I guarantee would be desirable, does that in fact affect? Does it affect traffic in larger portions of hours of the day? So we did what was called a capacity and operational analysis of the corridor, looking at the 2 lanes eastbound and the 1 lane westbound, and we basically analyzed that hourly, trying to achieve adequate level of service based on the signal timings, the amount of traffic that can actually go through. A level of service A is free flow traffic. A level of service F is pretty much gridlocked. So in looking at the traffic capacity and operational analysis through that segment, we did in fact find, that level of service is primarily in some of the more challenging hours of the day. It's still about level of service B and C. So from a capacity perspective, the constraint that railroad bridge does present is not as great as might be perceived. We applied those results to the railroad benefit analysis as a speed reduction factor. In other words, if this pinch point of the railroad does contribute to delays, let's assign it a speed and across the volume of traffic. And we did that and put it back into the cost-benefit analysis. The cost-benefit analysis is looking at basically any ratio that's less than 1 in a cost-benefit analysis is actually showing things are less economically, what's the word I'm looking for, Jamie? Economically feasible or economically desirable. And all of the alternatives that were looked at did have economic cost-benefit analysis numbers that were less than 1. The cost actually of the 2 alternatives that probably rose to the top as most feasible from a construction perspective were the shoe fly and the permanent offset alignment. The permanent offset alignment was probably what we would say the most feasible, as it had a construction cost of $7.6 million. So factoring in those construction costs, and given the traffic analysis that we did, we basically had to kind of look at the bang for the buck. And it was determined that we did have to walk away from expanding the structure simply because we know that in a situation with the traffic that is projected out for 20 years, we're pretty comfortable that the constraint between 7th and the 5th Street intersection, the traffic flow will meet desirable levels of service. And we feel like we can somewhat solve any issues that pop up with adjusting signal timing and just trying to cycle platoons of traffic through there rather than spending almost double the project costs because the entire segment from 8th Street to 3rd Street is about $7 million in construction costs just to reconstruct the roadway. This railroad bridge would be another $7.6 million on top of that, so that's double the costs. And as I had stated earlier, the structure has about 40 years of service life left. So we state that we're not precluding in the future if the structure needs to be replaced in 30 years, 40 years, and we're being proactive and there's a pot of money available. We're not doing anything as part of this study that would preclude coming in there and expanding. In fact, the geometry wouldn't negatively affect just coming in there and doing that expansion of the structure. You have to keep in mind it's not that long of a segment. So we just want to say that at the time of the 2022 construction, like I said, we did have to evaluate that and walk away from expanding it. So you will see at the end of the presentation, I'll leave the display up. We don't have an actual display of the 8th Street to 6th Street segment. I just have a PowerPoint slide, but it basically shows that from that segment we are reconstructing the roadway over there. We will make some profile improvements that are may slightly benefit the railroad vertical clearance, but primarily it will still be under the desirable height. We are making some operational improvements at 8th Street because the entire intersection is being reconstructed. The segment that's on 8th Street that heads out to the Ashland roundabout, that segment is actually being reconstructed in 2017. This fall, the city's coming out to do their utilities. The projects actually were at one time together, and that one moved forward a little quicker than this one. About 5 years later, we'll catch up, and 32 will be reconstructed on this segment. So, and like I said, I'll leave that display up at the end. But basically, that said, the reconstruction segment, we're looking for comments to be returned to us by June 24th. If you look, I think you can fold the comments over, and they're actually a prepaid mailer. Try to use some of the real good facts that are in the matrix to kind of answer some of your questions, and you can preface your comments on that. Fold that and try to get it back to us a month after the PIM. I put June 24th. There's also contact information in there. I've got an email address. I've got an email address and contact information for Eric, who's with the city, if you want to contact them as well. But we'll try to get all the public comments and stakeholder comments together to make some decisions. We'll try to work with the city to come to a decision on that preferred alternative design this summer. I know we'll probably, Eric, our group, our study group will probably do some outreach with the mill again. We'll probably do some outreach with St. Norbert's. There might be some more outreach we do with regard to some residents. But we'll try to come to that decision on what the preferred alternative is for downtown this summer. Then we'll try to strive to do a 30% plan review, plan submittal, and that's basically that preliminary design that I talked about that kind of launches us out of the gate to meet that construction schedule. We'll also prepare a draft environmental document that will basically document all of our alternative analysis, and it will cover all of the impacts that the preferred alternative has in great detail. Then basically the study will conclude in the fall of 2016, and we'll transition over to the construction effort, which is the project development team, in the fall. And they'll strive from fall 2016 to take our 30% preliminary design and go to final design so that they can achieve the city's utility work in 2021, in the fall maybe, and then we will achieve a letting that has construction occur in 2022. So I draw a distinction that the planning study, public information meeting efforts are kind of concluding now, but this PDS effort in the next 4 to 5 years to achieve the actual reconstruction design will pick up another public involvement facet, and certainly all the residents and all the businesses will be part of a conversation that is occurring for the reconstruction project. So if nobody has any general questions, or I should say I'll open it up to general questions. Go ahead.
I'm just wondering, in your analysis, your initial work, have you had any conversations with the business owner?
Yes, we have a stakeholder group that includes primarily chamber members. Definitely De Pere is in there. We've got residents that are in there, and we've. I know at one time, like right when we first kicked off the study, we were actually going door to door, going and talking to businesses, getting some of their ideas. We did postcard surveys. We spent that time just walking door to door and talking a lot with them. We have a really good feel. Kim being tuned into the economic development end of things, being the planning director, she's tuned into the parking issues and the alleyway that occurs to the back. So those conversations about, well, what does this construction mean to us? Those are really up her alley, that she's kind of thinking about, what are we going to do during this downtime of construction, and what best serves the business climate of drive-by and destination businesses and economic development. So, yeah, you're very welcome. Go ahead. I think so.
I haven't heard anything mentioned about the railroad siding that runs next to 555 Main Avenue, next to the condos.
Yeah.
It runs right through there. I live right next to it, so I'm very tuned into that siding. Right now, there's a tremendous amount of noise from the engine blowing their horns right by the buildings, 8 feet away from my balcony. They blow the horn all the time. And also, we're obviously concerned about the noise going across the tracks. There are a number of ways of making those sidings, making more those crossovers more quiet and more loud. Is there any thought about creating some kind of stop signals or barriers or something on that siding so we don't have to put up with all that horn noise from the railroad?
Yeah, I'm not really familiar with I guess we call it a spur line.
Yeah,
basically goes to the
mill.
Yeah. We certainly can talk about it a little bit more as we go into preliminary design. I'm not sure about the crossings reconstructed, if the sound is decreased if the crossings are reconstructed in any manner. But certainly, taking note of it. Eric, do you have something?
Yeah, one of the things we talked about at the beginning of the study was trying to get signals at that location so that we wouldn't have to have a situation where they have to blow the horn. So that is something we want to look at as part of the
Now
project.
you have 31 units on one side and 12 apartment units right on the other side of that crossing.
Yeah, we definitely like to do something. like that.
Very loud.
Great, I'm glad that was answered.
I also noticed that cars don't stop this street. Like the train comes and they just keep going and going.
Yeah, we get the accident
So
reports.
that's, I think something, a safety issue.
Great. I think we're definitely gonna stay tuned into the railroad conversation. Thank you. Anybody else have any general questions? Go ahead.
I have some specific questions.
Yep.
Perhaps you spoke when you were talking about the bridge, the railroad bridge,
Yes.
and the traffic going under. I believe you said there were 2 lanes eastbound and 1 west. I think that was that backwards.
I think it was backwards, yes.
Okay, because you're saying we weren't going to do anything, and I wanted to make sure that I didn't interpret that. No, we're going to change for that.
No, it's not changing. No.
Okay.
The patterns that we're seeing now, generally westbound, yeah.
And it sounds like you've been talking with the college. Last that I heard from the college is they were certainly not in favor of alternative 3 with the 1 ways because of what that does with actual college traffic and campus.
You have to keep in mind that at the time we had the public involvement meeting was in March, I think. We subsequently went out and met with them in April and had we met with the mill the same day that we met with the city. When they felt a little more comfortable, I think, when we were actually face to face and just describing in a little more detail kind of what our thoughts were on alternative 3. So,
Yeah, I represent that district, so I'm talking
Yeah.
to people, I'm trying to get that.
I'll also clarify
You've been
too.
talking to them, and that's great.
Yep. And I also know that they did not have their master plan done at the time that we had met with them as far as like where new dorms are going and all that stuff. It has subsequently been done since then. So I think in going and meeting with them again, we're revisiting more accurate information.
Is it, the diagram you had, I don't recall if it was alternate 1 or 3, you showed the diagram with the, you mentioned the proposed pedestrian crossing.
Yeah, it's moving to the east.
Right. The diagram should have also had it moving to the west. So you're talking about 2 pedestrian crossings or just 1? Because that diagram had the other one. The other alternative.
I think there's a mid-block that's still remaining. Yeah, it's not
The
J.
mid-block one that's in the middle of between 3rd and 4th, and then the one that's kind of already existing at 3rd. And maybe will be slightly adjusted to the east side of that intersection.
Today there's 1. So you're talking about
That one currently does not have a bump out. Yeah.
Okay.
That one currently does not have what we call a bump out. It's getting a bump out, which basically means the pedestrians have less distance to cross.
Well, the current one would be gone, right? And there would be 1 to the east and 1 to the west. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
In alternative 1, you talked about left turn lanes. If you're going westbound on Main and turning left onto 5th, are you talking about taking up parking then to put in a left turn lane? Is that what you're referring to?
Yeah, we don't need to buy right away. There's a number of stalls that are lost with each alternative. Correct me if I'm wrong, JB, but I think alternative 3, you lose 24 stalls, and alternative 1, you lose 51 stalls. And those are primarily for the left turn lanes. The largest loss of parking stalls occurs in the segment that is between 3rd and 4th Street in both alternatives. And that can be minimized by what we would term phasing of when that turn lane is used. So basically, you go to some big cities, and like they'll have hours that the turn lane is active, and it's a tow zone during other hours. There's the opportunity for the city to say, well, that turn lane is only used in the peak hours, so we can use it as parking lanes for a certain specific period of the day. And they'll have that opportunity to maintain the business use of those parking stalls.
What number you said?
You're losing 51 stalls in alternative 1. And alternative 3, you're only losing 24 stalls. There's over 202 stalls existing on the corridor.
Street.
On street, yeah.
And that information in the picture.
Yeah, it's all in the matrix, yeah.
Okay.
You're very welcome. Go ahead, in the blue.
Back to the one-way pairs, what is your research on getting like 3rd and 4th Street as one-way pairs? What does that do with speed and
That's a lot of the concerns that the speed is a lot of the concern that the city, not the city, but the St. Margaret's campus had, is that if we opened it up with just one-way traffic, that the speeds would increase. Any traffic calming that would be proposed would be something that the city would, it's outside the jurisdiction of the state, but certainly there might be potential to do traffic calming measures of some sort in the residential area, but speed's always an issue on residential streets, and enforcement is another issue too. So,
Thank you. The pedestrian signal that you've talked about at 3rd and Main.
you brought up a really good point. Let me clarify something. I know where you're going with this. When I talked about justifications for a signal, at the time of construction, there also there's not necessarily needed a signal at the intersection of Main and 3rd, coming right off of the bridge, right off the Cloud Alleyway. However, if you do the circulating pattern with 3rd and 4th becoming one-way pairs, if you think about the larger volume of traffic northbound on 3rd Street needing to turn, there might be some operational concerns with pedestrians and with more vehicles utilizing that circulating movement, that in fact we might jump up to a necessity of installing a traffic signal directly at the end of the bridge. And that would aid pedestrians as well. So that might be a potential if the 3rd and 4th Street pairs are installed.
Okay, so when you were talking about pedestrian signal, you were actually talking.
It would be actuated for pedestrians, and it could stop traffic if there is a pedestrian there, even if less vehicles are utilizing the
Are you
road.
talking green light or are you talking flashing yellow sign?
No, we're talking a traffic signal that would actually stop traffic. You'd have stop bars for traffic that would be coming off the Cloud Alleyway.
Would that slow the traffic up that much more?
Operationally, it's probably less.
Yeah, there is some queuing that would occur on the bridge versus in the 3rd and 4th Street block, but based on the measurements we've got and the modeling that we've done, it doesn't back up enough where that queue would be. There would be queuing on the bridge potentially, but it's no worse than what you're seeing now in the other block. So it moves it out of the downtown and onto the bridge.
And I think you're going to step over to the displays and you're going to probably question why signals will remain at 4th Street in this scenario, because there won't be any conflicting movements anymore. But I think the proposal is to not install them with construction.
That's still to be
It's still to be
determined. It depends on, there's a number of pedestrian movements there. It's a coordinated system, so there is a bigger picture of the whole downtown traffic signal system, how that's all work together.
So we need to still be looking at operations and determining whether the signal at 4th Street still remains. But we do feel that with the like I said, with the 3rd and 4th Street circulating movement, that delay factor or that level of service, I think we had like D or E in that segment, will possibly go up to a higher level of service or a better operation in that scenarios.
Okay, and then one last. Is there a bike lane, it's just hard to see on the sides, but is there a bike lane between 3rd and 4th on the north side of that?
I think so, yeah. Yes.
Okay, just so that it's clearly defined, because that's a.
And you'll notice that the existing main has marked bike lanes. Reed does not have marked bike lanes. And I don't believe they have even general.
Yeah, if you look at the bottom half of that page, the cross-section shows there is a marked bike lane. Maybe it's like red color.
It's really hard to see.
Yeah.
That first block, you can definitely see it on between 4th.
And bikes were a large part of the conversation. I'm going to keep going and going here. Bikes were a large part of the conversation too with the railroad alternatives too, because there's an existing master plan for bikes in the city, and they always use that Reed Street crossing that was installed as a pedestrian crossing as part of their bike plan.
And then one last one. It kind of looks as though you have pressure for a pedestrian or a mid-block crossing between 4th and 5th on Reed. You really have, we've got all that new housing, and then you have businesses immediately across servicing the housing. You know, it's a very long block. So if, you know, the other blocks don't really have that.
Yeah.
But that definitely has the residential and businesses.
We can definitely look at that. Good point. We'll make a note of that. Thank you. Okay, one more.
In the two intersections, you reference the possibility of a signal. But in your ledger, is this signal or roundabout?
Yeah, because anytime we need to do scoping level analysis of an intersection, if it's going to be proposed as a signal, it needs kind of by our policy to also be evaluated for a roundabout. When we looked at a roundabout at that location, the impacts were obviously too great for us to be installing one, but we just make note of it because it's our policy to analyze it both ways. Good point.
So 8th and Main is not getting around.
8th and Main is not getting around. No, we do have this layout here that basically shows the operational improvements that are proposed with a full reconstruction of 8th Street. And like I said, you'll have the same typical section that'll go underneath the structure here. You'll still have that merging traffic condition that we have heard people's concerns about how you come off of 8th Street and you need to merge over into a single lane. You'll still have that. We'll try to improve it as much as we can, maybe with some better signing and things like that. And obviously, having new construction offers you opportunities like that. So we'll try to make it as visible for the driver as possible.
When you guys leave here, if you want, take some of these comment forms for any of your friends or other people. We really need comments. You can check the box, which alternative you prefer. Give us your feedback on the railroads too. And there's the website down there too. If you don't want to mail these in with the prepaid mailer, please just get a hold of us on the website. Email us. We want your comments for this as we go to the final alternative, okay?
Thank you
Thanks.
very much, Mark.